This chapter will focus on the Amerindian population in North, Central, and South America. Scientists believe that life began in eastern Africa and through migration spread through the other continents. The Ice Age created a land bridge between Siberia and Alaska. Most scholars believe Amerins arrived about 14,000 years ago and then started to move south around 11,200 BCE. However, other remains put the dates earlier. Could they have developed boats to come from other areas of Asia? Evidence is still inconclusive. Scientists, however, did study the DNA from Japanese and Eskimo liver and found them to be almost identical. So there is scientific evidence to suggest that the theory of a land bridge from Asia to North America is correct. Columbus originally thought he traveled to the East Indies, so the natives we called Indians. To prevent confusion between the Indians of Southern Asia, the book labels the American Indians as Amerinds. Tribes are large associations of villages, bands, or clans that share a common language and often a common leader. These are the numerous tribes that existed in North and Central America. They often only united in wartime, as each group were isolated into individual villages and families. Tribes that settled in Alaska and the Arctic were hunters and gatherers. In the Pacific Northwest, they used the environment. There was a lot of trees, so they would use timber for their dwellings. They ate salmon. On the plains, it was the buffalo that provided them with hides for housing as well as meat for food. Agriculture first appeared in the Americas in Mexico around 5000 BCE. Evidence of most of these early societies comes from the archaeological record. Maize or corn was first established in central Mexico and spread north and south over time. Some areas gained complex societies with similar to those in early Egypt and Mesopotamia. The Adenas along the Ohio River Valley flourished between 1000 and 300 BCE. They had small villages but possible specialized labor to build religious mounds. Eventually they were absorbed by the Hopewell culture. It was a larger culture based on trade with other tribes east of the Rocky Mountains. They used the river systems to trade goods between people and were sustained by large amounts of food. While crops were grown, people foraged for meat and fish. Hopewell disappeared around 400 BCE. Between 700 and 1500 CE, a more complex society of small cities developed along the Mississippi River. It flooded in spring and brought fresh silt along its banks. Cahokia was the largest city, believed to house between 10,000 and 30,000 people. The people did not have any written records, thus little is known of the civilization, though digging continues. Hundreds of years of silt built up covering their buildings. Their society was affected by an earthquake around 1250 and basically collapsed, although unknown why that happened. This is a mound in what was Cahokia. Actually, there are several mounds. Many people believe that these were some sort of religious temples, and there is other settlements that is underground. Again, this was along the Mississippi River, and over the last 1,000 years, a lot of silt has covered these up. So this is something that is still being investigated, and this is near St. Louis, Missouri today. There were also civilizations in Central America. Olmec society began around 1800 BCE and lasted to 150 CEE, just west of the Yucatan Peninsula. This is today's Mexico. The Yucatan Peninsula was more for Mayans, but just to the west of that, in the olive, you would have the Olmecs. Their artwork consisted of 9-foot-high stone heads weighing 25 tons each. Another cultural artifact was passed down to other Mesoamerica civilizations, the long count calendar. They created one wheel with 365 notches to depict the days of the year, and another wheel with 260 notches, their ceremonial calendar. Each intersection of dates would only occur every 52 years. The great cycle that began in 3114 BCE, when they believed God created man, ended on December 21st, 2012. So that world should end and a new one begins. This depicts an endless cycle of life, not reincarnation as the Hindus believed, but a logical order. Mayan society began around 150 to 900. No one knows why Olmec society declined, but much of its culture was recreated and improved upon by the Mayans. It's very similar to Sumerian culture being adopted by the Akkadians and Babylonians. They centered their civilization in the Yucatan Peninsula and south into Guatemala. Mayan culture spread through neighboring city-states rather than one supreme leader for the whole civilization. Each town or city was headed by a king, who was also the chief priest. They had nobility, priests, warriors, and merchants that created a mannerless system using serfdom and slavery. The free peasants would work the fields and pay tribute, taxes to the nobility. In return, the warriors would protect them. Their writing consists of many intricate pictographs. The Spanish burned everything, and there are only 4 known books, although stone carvings remain. Translations depicted their civilization as warlike, however, they feared death. Again, this is the Yucatan Peninsula. One of the key cities is Chichen Itza. This is a map of the different temples of Chichen Itza. This is the main temple, which is now a UN preserved site. They focus their religious ceremonies on the agricultural calendar. One of the most important days is the first day of spring. This is when you have a rebirth and of the planting season. When I visited Chichen Itza, one of the buildings that I found most interesting was this observatory. The Mayans were a peaceful society and stable, thus they started to map the stars. They also played a ball game using sticks, and the idea was that they needed to put the ball through that hoop up on the top of that wall. While this was peaceful at first, eventually they would be conquered by the Aztecs. The Aztecs would adopt this game, and if you lost the game, then you would be put to death. So this was an original version of something similar to Highlight today. The Yucatan Peninsula gets a lot of rainfall. However, there are no rivers. The jungle is very rocky with limestone. Limestone is permeable, and the water actually seeps through the earth. There are actually underground rivers, and every once in a while there is a sinkhole that develops. The Spanish called them cenotes. This is a cenote not too far from Chichen Itza. This is where they would get a lot of their fresh water from. You can actually climb down in there, and there are pictures of people swimming. There are also fish, by the way, that are in there. So it's, again, an underground river system. Just north of Mexico City today was a society developed during the classical period, Teotihuacan. Around 500, it had a population of over 200,000. The volcanic area was rich in obsidian, volcanic glass that was sharpened for arrowheads. It's a black material. No written records exist for this civilization, and authorities believe an uprising by the peasants may have destroyed the city. The Mayans also had internal conflicts between their own city-states, and thus weakening their civilizations to outsiders. This is a pyramid of Teotihuacan. The Toltecs lived 30 miles northwest of Teotihuacan, where the Toltecs centered around the capital of Tula. They filled the military vacuum. One faction, believed expelled from Tula, founded Chichen Itza near present-day Cancun. The faction had vowed to return someday to Tula as white-skinned people traveling by boat across the Gulf of Mexico. By the mid-1100s, the Toltecs gradually decayed until the arrival of the Aztecs in 1325. These are stone sculptures of warriors on top of the main pyramid of Tula. And in South America, along the Andes Mountains, you would have bands of hunter-gatherers that would arrive around 10,000 BCE. Around 1200 BCE, Shaban society developed along the Pacific coast and the Andes Mountains chain in today's Peru. The climate was arid and needed irrigation. Other civilizations of the Tiahuanaco around Lake Titicaca and the Huari and Chimor also succeeded the Chavans until the Incas arrived in the 1400s.